Welcome to the Into Novus Knowledge Agronomy Podcast, your go-to resource for agronomic insights, technology solutions, and ongoing education. At Into, we combine agronomic expertise from soil analysis to best practice application methodologies to provide a holistic view for your yield optimization. Our focus is on practical strategies that improve efficiency and drive better results in the field. Join us for interesting discussions, expert advice, and the latest advancements shaping modern agriculture. Whether you're in the field, on the road, or at your facility, we're here to keep you informed and ahead of the curve. Welcome to the Into Podcast. Today I'm joined with Derek, my counterpart in Northwest Missouri, and Rodney from over there in Illinois. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, thanks.
I'm good, Nick.
Good. Derek, do you want to start us maybe with a little update in the geography?
Yeah. Right now, similar to a couple of weeks ago, we're now just waiting for harvest to roll around. I think I I've seen a little bit of corn harvested here over the last week, but majority of that is still with the growers who have access to some dryers. It's still running. I've heard anywhere from 19 to 21% moisture. But here this week and certainly next, I think almost everyone in my territory will probably have some corn that's ready to go. Now, as far as soybeans go, I'm starting to see some shorter maturity, earlier plantings starting to turn just a little bit, but there's still a lot of soybean fields out there that haven't started to turn at all. And so I'd say for the most part, we're still probably 2 weeks out on soybeans getting cut. But harvest for both crops will be here pretty quick.
Rodney?
Yeah, so I'll echo a lot of what Derek just said. Corn harvest yesterday was kind of the start day for some operations. Problem we got up here, the stalk quality is deteriorating quickly. And so a lot of guys are that early planted, earlier maturity, they're getting after it. We're not at the drier moistures that Derek was talking about yet. We're still in the mid-20s, but guys with dryers and got acres ahead of them have nosed in. Soybeans, we've still got a healthy crop that's just starting to senesce a little bit. We've got some 2-2 maturities to the north part that are probably be cut the end of this week or first of next, but majority of the beans are still rocking and rolling. It's amazing. The corn's deteriorating and the beans seem to be hanging in there. So we're as Derek said, we're probably 2 solid weeks from bean cutting. There'll be a lot of corn picked before we cut many beans.
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of the same comments you guys had. Probably have maybe a little more harvested, but it's still mainly the early birds. Driest I've heard 16%. That was on some sand, but most of it's still in the low 20s. And really, as you go east, I've still got milk line in some of that corn, which is pretty amazing. But the early beans, as you guys mentioned, some of those are starting to turn. And I think, like Rodney said, we get closer to the 20th or so, a couple of weeks away. We might have some early ones ready to harvest. But other than that, it's mainly just the drought taking its toll now on the soybeans. It's funny, we were wet all summer long and now we're dry, but that's how it goes.
I would say I would echo too the dry. We're extremely dry, and I marvel at how we can be. We were saying shut it off, and now we wish we would get a rain. Same way with heat, hottest we've ever had, and now it's coldest. And so it's talk about extremes we've had at this growing season, and we're not done yet.
No, you're right, Rodney. And we're supposed to be 90 at the end of the week, so that'll get a lot of this corn pushed right along, and should be full swing harvest next week. Derek, I think we'll start out. So last time we mentioned fall fertility, and we said we get into fall herbicide applications on this one. So I think I'll flip it over to you to talk a little bit about what's the importance of fall herbicide applications, and then maybe what should we focus on if we're going to do that.
Yeah, so fall herbicides, as far as that goes, I mean, when we think of our pest in corn or soybeans, next year, I don't know if southern rust is going to be bad in corn. tar spot, certain insects and things like that. But the one pest that we know, I don't care if next year is hot, dry, cold, or wet, whatever the season weather brings us, we know weeds are going to be a problem, and they continue to be a problem. And I think when we think about fall, a lot of times our mind automatically goes to fertility, right? And it should for good reason. But every year we continue to battle these weeds. Take soybeans, for example, my territory right now. Um, I would say weeds were probably one of the number one limiting factor in soybeans this year. Just, we don't have a lot of disease driving stress and things like that. And so in my mind, we have an opportunity here as soon as harvest comes out, to go ahead and get ahead of weeds. I mean, there's really not a secret to weed control unless you call getting ahead of weeds and starting clean being that secret. And fall allows that opportunity for you to do that. And that's why I'm a big advocate of that fall application. One, because again, it's kind of our first pass, if you will, to get ahead of a lot of our weed issues and to start clean next spring during planting. But number two, it's relatively speaking a pretty simple application, and I guess that's one piece of advice I'd give for those who are going to do a fall application or thinking about doing it, is to keep it simple and remember what we're trying to accomplish here. We're not trying to keep our fields weed free until our first post pass in June, right? We're simply trying to get weeds at a level that when we go next spring, it allows, whether we're no-till burn down or even just putting down lay-by residuals in the spring, it allows our pre's to be more successful and gives us that better opportunity and better chance of starting clean. And so when I say keep it simple, I'm talking, 2 to 3 side of action tank mixes. And so products, whether it be 2,4-D, dicamba, metribuzin, glyphosate if you're burning down weeds, sulfentrazone would be another common one. Products like Valor. We don't have to get into our even 20, 30, $40 tank mixes type deal, because really all we're doing is trying to burn down the winter annuals that might be coming up, the perennials that might be going dormant, and then just trying to keep weeds at bay and having a lighter flush of weeds when we get around to next spring. Now, I mentioned the winter annuals, and typically in fall, our key targets are winter annuals like mare's tail and pennycress and henbit. The reason why our fields are purple in the spring and things like that. But we also, like I said, I mentioned our perennials. So things like dandelion and some of our thistles and stuff like that. We're going after those weeds that are going dormant. Hitting those in the fall is a good time because they're taking all those their energy reserves and things like that and sticking it down into the root system. And so they take a lot of that herbicide in there, because the key to controlling perennials is taking out root system. And the one specific weed that I'll mention, as far as perennials go, that continues to become more and more of a problem in my territory, Northwest Missouri, is Johnson grass. I'm getting more and more calls of that one in the spring. That is a perennial grass. I think we a lot of times think fall herbicides, we're thinking our broadleaf weeds, but Johnson grass is a perennial grass that is getting worse and worse. I think the University of Missouri, Dr. Bradley's group, they have confirmed some glyphosate resistant Johnson grass in Northwest Missouri as well. And it's really to the point where our options in season, if you are in an area where you do have Johnson grass, you need to be going after it this fall, because our options that we have in crop or in season will keep it at bay at best, but you're probably not going to completely kill it type deal. Now, I would still encourage in our tank mixes keeping glyphosate in there. I'm not saying there's not still susceptible populations to glyphosate, but we're going to have to be utilizing our group ones, or they might be our FOPs and DIMs, so our clethodims, but then also some of our FOPs like fusilade and different things like that are still going to be effective on it as well. Now, I will say this fall, if it's in your fields right now and you go through with harvest, to ensure you get some regrowth on it, say after you cut soybeans that has some in it, or even some corn you had it in it, let some of that regrowth happen before you go back in there and try to spray it. But again, it goes back to why I said this is a key timing for perennials. And since this is a perennial, that fall timing, you're more likely to get more of that herbicide down into the rhizomes, because it spreads through rhizomes into the root system and actually kill the plant versus just burning it back a little bit. So those are some of the keys to remember, in fall herbicides in general, but also specifically with Johnson grass. It's going to continue to be a more and more of a problem in the future.
I appreciate that, Derek. I like your point about keeping it basic. And one thing I will mention, just experience from our way last year. A lot of people, I think, did what I thought at the time was fundamentally right, which is wait until early November to try to make that application. Problem was last year we flipped the calendar to early November and it got wet and stayed wet. And so I just mentioned if you're going to push the envelope a little bit in timing, make sure you include a residual like what you're talking about, Derek. Whether it's Valor or sulfentrazone or some ALS chemistry, but just be sure you have something in there with some residual to it.
Well, you bring up a good point on timing because if we're burning down weeds in the fall, there is a balance there. We do want to wait. I like, especially for our winter annuals that are going to be emerging this fall, they might not emerge till late October, early November. But remember, if we're burning down weeds in November, if our temperatures are getting down into the 50s or less, our burn down activity, our activity of our herbicides is probably going to go down a little bit too. And so if we start cooling off, we got to make sure we're using full rates of whatever we are using, adjuvant loads and things like that. And like Nick said, highly encourage having the residual products in there. Like I mentioned, the Metribuse and the sulfentrazone, the Valor, those have been excellent products from a residual standpoint. The only thing I'll say about residuals is we want to make sure those get applied before the ground is frozen. They won't be able to get incorporated into the soil, so don't apply those to frozen ground. But as we get later into the fall, just be cautious of temperature and our herbicide activity and things like that if we're trying to burn down weeds.
So something I'll throw in, guys, you guys deal with Johnson grass. We deal with shattercane, which we're talking the same family. So my listeners to the north, everything these guys have said also relates to shattercane. So it's something else and nobody likes it, but a lot of times if pure shattercane will be pocketed, the best thing is go out and cut the heads off of that. Just take an hour someday, just go cut heads, put them in a sack and burn them so that you're not spreading that seed when you do harvest it. So, I know in some cases there's too much of it, but if you got a lot of times up here, it's little corners or it's in just little areas, that just cutting the heads off and removing that opportunity goes a long way also.
Good points, Rodney. I guess just to flip it back to you, last time we talked about fall fertility and something we wanted to revisit a little bit was the nutrient value in that residue because there's quite a bit of nutrient value. How do we look at that? How do we handle that, Rodney?
Yeah, so going piggybacking on what Derek said, if you're going to be out there doing a fall burn down pass, you can also have some tank mix partners with some residue breakdown stock degradation products. And why would we do that? So if we look at the nutrients that are in the stalks or the soybean stubble after we harvest, we got to remember that a lot of nutrients leave in the grain, but also there's a lot left in the stalks in corn and the stubble and soybeans. And so I call it the big three: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash. Um, to put it in perspective, a 250 bushel corn crop, 40% or 113 units of nitrogen is still in that stalk. 30% of the P are at 40 units, and 81% of your potash, or 275 units of potash, are still in those stocks. And sulfur, which I am going to highlight sulfur because sulfur is a big player in nutrient uptake, especially phosphorus. So by looking at those numbers, and if you put values to them, the big three plus sulfur, that's about $220 an acre potentially that's still in our corn stalks. If I look at 70 bushel bean crop, there's 25% nitrogen, 25% phosphorus, 45% of your potash, and 50% of your sulfur in soybean stubble. Equates about $90 an acre. So the reason I bring that up in times that we're in now with all-time highs in fertilizer and all your inputs, there may be an opportunity if you're doing a fall burn down pass to throw stock degradation products in to help accelerate or speed up the breakdown process of that stover, so that in the growing season of 26, when we get temperatures and soil contact and we start mineralization, we're able to capture some of those nutrients that is left out there from your 25 crop. And oh, by the way, you already paid for that nutrients that are in those stalks and that stubble. You paid for that in 25. So we're not saying that we're going to get 100% of that back, but we're saying that there's a certain percentage of that that we can mineralize and help the 26 crop. We're deep, we just mentioned we're dry. And so we need to help speed up the breakdown process, get something microbes into that trash to help the degradation product. The other the other comment I'll make is at harvest with our combines, especially in corn and soybeans, we want to make sure we're getting that trash spread out. So a lot of these guys are using huge soybean platforms, 35, 40, 40. Now there's even a 50 footer out. We have got to get that, make sure that we're spreading that trash, soybean stubble, the whole width. And because if not, we leave um, ridges, or not rigid, but strips of trash, and then when we come back in the spring to plant into those, it can cause issues. Same way with corn stalks. A lot of 8 and 12 row corn heads. We got to make sure that that chaff and everything is getting spread the width of our harvest pass. Um, by doing that, and if we do some degradation, it just helps a lot, not only nutrient availability potentially, but also plantability in the spring. It just makes our spring pass a lot easier.
Like you nailed that right there, Rodney, with the plantability, because we've talked before, management's a lot different nowadays. When we're putting on extra nitrogen and extra fungicide on this corn crop, and we're raising one heck of a crop, that could be some massive stock load to have to deal with. So, like you said, not only just from getting our nutrient value back out, but even just a plantability standpoint for next year.
Well, and I would say even I just caution even guys who utilize tillage, whether you're minimum till or full tillage. I think last year, thinking of it, I think I got more calls from guys who are conventional till and trying to prep their fields for planting in the spring. It's not just the planter getting through that residue, it's our tillage equipment. And especially if you got to say a drag harrow or something on the back of that finisher, that's what wants to ball up. And I know several growers that would have to go over the field twice with the finisher just to level out that residue. So it's not just about getting the trash, because actually the finisher was creating a worse issue for the planter. But even if you're tillage, don't think I don't have to worry about residue this fall, because it can even, impact how well your tillage equipment is getting across that field as well.
Good points, Derek. The last point I'll make, and I'll just briefly mention this, that we don't really have to dive deep into it, but just I started thinking about soil sampling this fall. We talked about fall fertility last time. We talked about the importance of soil sampling to get a idea of what that nutrient load is across that field. But when we start thinking about things have changed a little bit about soil sampling this fall, things have turned off really dry. And I just wanted to mention to folks that, when we get into dry conditions like this, one nutrient we can especially underreport with the soil sample would be potassium. Part of that being the fact that it's not leaching out of that crop residue. It takes a pretty significant amount of water in some cases to get that all of that potassium leached out. And we don't always get that every fall, but we go take a sample right now. We basically had no rain on this crop in the last month or better. There's not a lot of potassium that's been leached out. The other piece of it is you start getting in some of these clays, certain clays, and they're going to trap that potassium and underreport it in the soil too. So I just, word of caution, you might wait until we get some soil moisture till it returns before you start soil sampling. Otherwise, you could see some underreporting on some of these nutrients, especially potassium. Um, yeah, you might wait till a little bit deeper into the fall. But that said, that's all I was really going to mention on that. Any points you guys want to add on that soil sampling piece?
No, you nailed it. But I guess, like we said our last podcast, soil test is going to be critical this year. So that told about the nutrient loads, but we need to know what's in the soil. And one thing we've hit on to pH. Make sure you're watching your pH this year, and also that can also in the dry conditions watch when you test also, because that could skew the pH number.
Yeah, that's a good point, Rodney, on pH. I mean, it can lower that pH. I didn't mention it just because we had most of our soils, we had pretty significant rainfall after that fertilizer application. So I don't know how it'll pan out this fall with the dry conditions, but I do know it's going to impact potassium for sure. But good point, Rodney. Well, guys, I appreciate your time. I think that's probably enough for now. And I hope all of you guys will join us next time as we'll dive deeper into, we should have a lot more as far as 2025 harvest results, kind of trends we're seeing so far. But thank you all very much for listening, and we'll look forward to joining you next time.
Thank you for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Into Novus Knowledge. Please reach out to your Into agronomist if we can help in any way. Join us next time for more in-depth agronomic advice.